Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to break down an incredibly powerful tool for thinking more clearly and, honestly, for making much stronger arguments. We're talking about first principles. This is the hidden logic that, once you see it, can totally change how you engage in pretty much any debate.
You know that feeling, right? When you're in a discussion and it just feels like you're talking past each other? You're both making points, you're both throwing out facts, but you're just not getting anywhere. You're just stuck, going around and around.
It's exactly like that, isn't it? A never-ending ping-pong match. You serve up a statistic, they volley back with a practical point. Back and forth, back and forth. But here's the thing. Nobody ever really lands a decisive point. It's just exhausting, and it doesn't lead to any kind of real breakthrough or understanding.
So how do we break out of that frustrating cycle? Well, that's exactly what this explainer is all about. Here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at why we have to get beyond those surface-level arguments. Then, we'll get into what first principles actually are. After that, we'll see how you can build your own arguments on that solid foundation, how to spot when someone else's argument is built on shaky ground, and finally, we'll unpack a really powerful debate move called the even-if rebuttal.
Okay, let's dive into our first section, moving beyond those surface-level arguments. We're going to see why just trading practical points back and forth, well, it's just not enough to really get to the heart of an issue.
I mean, it's our natural instinct, right? We jump straight to the practical stuff. You know the questions. How much is this going to cost? What's the effect on jobs? What about the economy? And look, those questions are important, for sure. But focusing only on them is exactly why we get trapped in that ping-pong match. It completely misses the real debate that's happening just beneath the surface.
So, if that's the problem, what's the solution? Well, that brings us right to our second section. What are first principles? Honestly, you should think of these as the absolute bedrock, the fundamental building blocks of any real debate.
So what is a first principle? It's the core moral, theoretical, or even philosophical idea that sits at the very foundation of an argument. It's not about the nitty-gritty details, it's about the fundamental belief system that's driving a person's entire perspective.
And I love this way of putting it. First principles. They are those lingering doubts you feel deep down. You know, it's that gut feeling when someone makes a purely practical case for something and it just feels, well, wrong, even if you can't quite put your finger on why. Practical points alone just can't touch that feeling.
Let's make this really concrete. Think about this for a second. Imagine a purely cost-benefit analysis concludes that it would be efficient to put a price tag on a human life. We all just instinctively recoil from that, don't we? But why? Why does that feel so fundamentally, deeply wrong? The answer is in our first principles.
And this is what's so cool about it. That powerful feeling that life is priceless, it isn't just one vague idea. It can be justified from so many different rock-solid angles. From a legal perspective, putting a value on one life automatically devalues all human life. From a humanist view, it's just innately wrong to try and quantify something like human dignity. A religious argument might be that only a higher power can determine a soul's value. And from a social contract standpoint, we agree to protect everyone's life to make sure our own is protected. See? 4 different logical roads, all leading to the same powerful core principle.
Okay, so we get what they are. Now for the fun part. Let's actually put them to work. Section 3. How to build an argument using first principles as your unshakable foundation.
So any really strong argument has this basic structure. It's so simple. First, you have your idea. This is your core proposition, what you're trying to prove. That's your first principle. Then you build out your analysis. That's the logical reasoning, the why and the because that explains your idea. And finally, you back it all up with evidence. These are the examples or case studies that show your principle in action in the real world.
And here is a perfect classic example of 2 first principles clashing head-to-head, the role of government. On one side, you have the small government principle, which is all about maximizing individual freedom and letting people make their own informed choices. A great example is legalizing but regulating something like smoking. But on the other side, you have the big government principle. This one is about promoting the social good and shaping choices for what's best for the community. And a perfect example of that is mandatory seatbelt laws. You see? Debates about specific policies are often just proxy wars between these 2 totally different fundamental worldviews. So, now that we know how to build a solid argument, let's flip the script and go on the defensive. Section 4 is all about spotting flawed arguments. Think of this as your built-in logical defense system. And you know this is the best part. You do not need to be an expert on whatever topic is being discussed. You don't have to have every single fact and figure memorized. All you have to do is listen carefully for flaws in the logic and the structure of the argument itself.
So, here are 5 of the most common flaws to listen for. An assertion is just a statement presented as fact with 0 proof. A contradiction is when someone makes 2 points that can't possibly both be true. Casual causation is when someone says A caused B, but offers no real link. A false dichotomy pretends there are only 2 choices, when really there are more. And the classic straw man, that's when someone attacks a weak argument that you never even made in the first place. Keep an ear out for these, you'll start hearing them everywhere.
All right, it's time for our final section, and we've saved a really powerful technique for last. Let's talk about the even-if rebuttal. This can be a complete game changer.
Okay, so picture this scene. Your opponent lays out a plan that just sounds completely wild. You think it's logistically impossible, way too expensive, just totally impractical. What's your gut reaction? What do?
The trap most of us fall into is we waste all of our time and energy arguing why their plan won't work. We get bogged down in the weeds of logistics, funding, and all the practical hurdles. And guess what? We are right back in that same old ping-pong match.
But here is the power move. Instead of fighting about whether it's possible, you grant them their premise. You say, you know what? Fine. Let's just imagine your plan works perfectly, without a single hitch. And then you argue about the dangerous consequences that would happen even if it was a perfect success. You've just completely reframed the entire debate.
This is a fantastic example of that in action. So instead of getting stuck in a debate about whether a unified African Union army is even viable, you pivot. You say, even if it was perfectly funded and organized, what happens then? And that's where the real argument is. You'd be creating incredibly powerful new militaries in states that might have very fragile democratic systems. Now you've shifted the debate away from boring logistics and toward a much deeper, more important principle about power, stability, and governance.
So, if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's this. If you want to have more meaningful, more productive debates, you have to stop playing the ping-pong match of practical points. You've got to dig deeper and find the first principle that's really at the heart of the issue, because that's where the real conversation is waiting to happen.
So here's a little challenge for you. The next time you're in a debate, or even just listening to one on the news or online, try this out. Don't just follow the surface-level facts and figures. Ask yourself, what's the hidden first principle that's actually driving this whole thing? You might be surprised what you find. Thanks so much for joining me.